every year, the alerts keep coming, right? Wildfires, floods, mass shootings, extreme weather, infrastructure failures, disease outbreaks, and so on. And yet somehow, most people still aren't prepared. Not because they don't care, but because modern preparedness has become overwhelming, right? Thousands of hazards, thousands of sources, thousands of opinions. And in the middle of a crisis, most people freeze.
I don't know if the public really has a full understanding of we are way more, I don't say on our own, but we have to be much more locally resilient. They really don't have the full scope of the challenges and loss of support our emergency management systems are facing with changes happening in FEMA and what that looks like in the practical tactical when they are doing the local disaster response, because a lot of our areas rely on those funds. And there's a lot of disconnect from the public to, FEMA will come, FEMA will save us. And that's something that we not only need to bust through, we got to empower people and help them take initiative and responsibility there.
And that's a difficult reality to talk about, not because emergency managers don't care, but because disasters themselves are becoming larger, more expensive, more complex, and more frequent. And increasingly, communities are being forced to ask a hard question: what happens when people have to become more resilient? You're listening to DisasterClass Podcast by Instinct Ready Emergency Management. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of DisasterClass, the podcast that's dedicated to helping you educate, prepare, and equip yourself for life's disruptions. I'm Jason Perez, and with me today is Jason Martin, aka Pappy. Pappy, welcome.
Thank you, Jason. It's always good to be here, and I am really excited about today's episode.
Yeah, and we're really excited because we had an awesome interview with Ginny Katz from HazAdapt, and we're going to learn more about what she's doing, a very cool new app, and that's really helping a lot of people.
One of the things that stood out immediately in this interview was that it wasn't really a conversation about gadgets or tech, but it was more a conversation about human behavior. And we're talking about why people delay preparedness, why people freeze during emergencies, and why so many preparedness campaigns, they're struggling to actually connect with people.
The way that emergency authorities have been approaching preparedness has definitely been a bit more on the all hazard side. And that's very overwhelming for the public. When you tell people, get ready for everything, they're like, where do I start? And when it's funny, when I ask emergency authorities, when you say all hazards, which ones do you mean? And they'll go, well, the ones that matter here. And I'm like, well, you've got to tell the public which ones matter here. When we think, I'm going to get prepared, we think, I'm going to go buy emergency kits or get my flashlights or buy. And truly, preparedness is much more about awareness. What do I have? Who do I have around me? And what are the systems that I could be resourceful with rather than just stockpiling? So there's a bit of a misconception of what actually is preparedness. And for many Americans, we just have very little space to be able to really fulfill that 2 weeks worth of food. That's a lot of food for a family of 4. And I was just doing some calculations on that the other day. That could be $3,000 plus just to get that much food on the table or prepared for a family. So it is overwhelming. It's expensive. There's not enough space. And in order to find really great information on what to do, people are often left going on this massive Easter egg hunt online. So different websites, different apps. Where do I go for here? And those are a lot of the main challenges on why it's difficult to get prepared.
And that's probably one of the biggest disconnects in emergency management, right? Inside the profession, preparedness feels urgent, but outside the profession, most people are just trying to survive and just get through everyday life. And so preparedness becomes something people, right, they intend to do later, until suddenly later becomes now.
It doesn't matter if you're the smartest person in the world. When you are stressed or you're in disaster, your ability to process, and your cognitive functioning goes low, right? We do not default to our best. We default to our level of training or what's around us. And since most of us haven't trained, we often are going, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And we really had to come to that term. Most people are at a just-in-time preparedness level, meaning I'm not really going to focus on this until I absolutely must, or I don't at all and now it's too late. And that's a very real reality that we wanted to build for, because whether you've been the most prepared, all of us can be caught, off guard, unaware, or just without our supplies or without our needs or in another compromised situation.
And honestly, that line describes a lot of people. Not because they're lazy, not because they don't care, but it's because preparedness competes with every other stressor in modern life. And let's admit it, there's a lot of things that cause stress. So once panic enters into the equation, people usually go to that default mode of whatever information is the easiest to access.
When we're in danger and we're scared, we reach out for whatever's available, right? That's just what humans do. And for finding information online, right, we've grasped at Google. We will go to Facebook and social media because it's easy and accessible, and that's our most common little rat path online, right? And what people are not commonly used to is going to their emergency management website. Right. Or people are more used to downloading apps. That's why I think Watch Duty is doing so well right now, because their interface, one, it's easy to download, but their design is great compared to most official, hazard maps or GIS, which is very technical and a lot more integrated for the general public.
And that observation becomes the turning point for this entire episode, because if people naturally reach for fast, simple, accessible information, well, then maybe preparedness itself has to evolve. Maybe preparedness has to become more usable, more approachable, and more human-centered. And that right there is where HazAdapt enters the story.
Where HazAdapt comes in, so and I should preface all this, my background is in disasters and diseases and epidemiology, disease control and emergency management. And, we are really taught how to support top down. But as we were doing all this preparedness outreach and trying to get people involved, what I kept wishing for was, man, people just need a little emergency manager in their pocket. They just need somebody who's going to tell them exactly what to do, because people would come to our events and maybe we give them a pamphlet or we have a PowerPoint, and we'd see people toss our pamphlets in the trash on the way out. Yeah. And we know from later on that people are like, oh, I went to that event. Didn't we talk about this? They weren't really remembering much. But what they did remember was the interaction with you, the emergency manager. They remembered how you felt. And so it got me thinking, hey, you know what? We've got Facebook, we got Instagram. Why don't we have an app that helps people get prepared? And that really set me on this journey of, all right, if we were to create a platform that built bottom-up resilience, what would that look like? And that's what HazAdapt is.
And this is a really important distinction, because preparedness often gets treated like a universal checklist. And anywhere you look about preparedness, it is a checklist. And so that's what people are thinking about. But real people have different risks, different families, different limitations, and different needs.
The way that I experience a disaster or a hazard is going to be very different than somebody else, just because of who I am in this body and what I have around me. So it acts like a hazard helper in your hand. You pick a hazard, whether that's wildfires, active shooter, or dirty drinking water, and it'll tell you step by step what to do. It's all written out in bulleted points, easy to scan, only actionable information, and it's 3rd to 8th grade reading level that you can customize as you need. So if you got kids, pets, farm animals, older folks, people with disabilities that you need to consider in your safety, you can customize that right then and there in HazAdapt. So it's that immediate information resource to help you know what to do.
So that might sound simple, but in emergency management, simplicity is hard, especially during stress, because the more overwhelmed people become, the less capacity they have to process, whether that's technical language, complicated systems, or massive blocks of information.
But beyond just information, it's going to connect you to response resources, so different crisis support options, to different preparedness tools, and a lot of other systems that are not, that are both, government-based or nonprofit-based or local community group-based to help you find, entities around you that can help support in that disaster. One of the big differences between HazAdapt and other safety apps is that we were started by safety professionals. We were started by people who understood what people are really needing, rather than saying, oh, we can build features, we can build something that we think will help. We built HazAdapt to fill gaps that were left behind.
And really, Jason, that's where this conversation becomes much bigger than just one app. Because what Ginny is actually describing, it's a different philosophy of preparedness.
That urgency that we feel is not felt by the public. And when it comes to preparedness, people do not want to be chased. What they really want is they want you to be the leader of the conga line onto the lifeboat. And so when we have these tabling events, which is one of the most common ways that emergency managers engage the public, what you'll see is a whole table with like 10,000 different brochures and cards and QR codes. And what we're hoping is that the person comes by and they're like, oh my gosh, yes. And they just start grabbing it all up and they take it home and they study it and they save it and frame it and they're ready. And the reality is that's usually not what happens. And in fact, we put so much emphasis on them trying to get our resources that we miss an opportunity to actually engage them as a person. And when we think about what the public is actually going to remember, it's the interaction. So my big recommendation is get your resources together for a quick handoff bundle and focus on the fun.
So that may be one of the most important observations in this entire interview. Preparedness is not just an information problem, it's a human behavior problem. And increasingly, emergency managers are being forced to rethink not just what information gets delivered, but how people actually experience preparedness.
So at this point in the interview, the conversation shifts from theory to real moments, things that we are actually experiencing. Moments where ordinary people were trying to make decisions while they're under stress. And honestly, these stories are where the entire philosophy behind HazAdapt starts making sense.
Two girls were hiking and they come upon somebody who is unresponsive. They're like 19. These are young girls. And they don't know what to do. One of them has HazAdapt, pulls it up, goes to CPR, and starts going through the ABCs. And what do I do? All right, they're still breathing. We do not need to do CPR yet, but we do need to get help. I don't have signal. What do we do? Right. So they were able to find some information and find local information on who should be calling and where to get there. That's huge. Right. Doing CPR on somebody who is breathing can actually be really dangerous.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So that's preparedness in the real world, right? Not giant Hollywood disaster scenarios, just ordinary people trying to make good decisions during confusing moments. And often those moments happen very fast.
This one couple, both of them are vets. They have, veterans. They are both retired. So they've had, some safety training experience there. And they're at home and I'm cooking dinner. And their 5-year-old pulls boiling water onto themselves from the stove. It's a very common incident, right? Kids want to help. They don't realize. And they're fully clothed, right? So they're pulling this on. The kids screaming. Both parents are freaking out. Your parent brain kicks in. You're like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. So one parent goes to Google. Another parent pulls up HazAdapt. And in the time of both of them finding information, the parent on Google is like going, okay, I think we do this. They're just trying to find something that's not just burn ointments. The parent that pulled up HazAdapt saw, if you see 30% or more of the body burns, you need to go to the ER. And then do not pull off the clothes until it is fully cooled and wait till professional help, because you could actually rip skin off and that becomes even more deadly. And so they go to the ER, they don't pull any of that off. And the physician there at the ER said, you know what, you saved your kid's life by not pulling off their clothes.
Jason, that story stuck with me, especially as a parent, because sometimes preparedness gets framed as stockpiling gear or giant plans, worst case scenarios. But often preparedness is just helping people making better decisions during very stressful moments.
When we have these CERT events, community preparedness events, we'll actually do a group prep check. So we've been doing the wildfire one, up here in Pacific Northwest, and I'll have it on my screen. All right, where does this, go? If we're going to do, signing up for alerts, and then they'll be like, put in before. And they're all kind of answering, and you'll hear them sometimes debate. No, I'm going to do this here. And as they go through, and the end, when you get to score, you see people start going, what'd you get? Well, I think this is, And they actually start having that collective preparedness experience with you.
Yeah.
That is so powerful. And we don't really have that otherwise, right?
Right.
And maybe that's the biggest lesson from this entire conversation. Preparedness cannot just be fear, checklists, or giant binders sitting on a shelf. It has to be usable, approachable, social, and realistic, because resilience ultimately starts long before the disaster strikes. It starts the moment people begin feeling capable instead of overwhelmed.
So HazAdapt is available on app stores and Play Store, so you can go download it. It's 100% free. And it's also online, app.hazadapt.com. And for emergency authorities listening, the best way to share HazAdapt is with the link gethazadapt.com. That gives people an option, choose whatever app store you want or online. And HazAdapt also works offline with the app. So once you download it, it's there. All that information and all that good stuff is there for you. So that's what we usually recommend. But if you want to stay in touch with us, we have our great website with our blog and our research that's on there. And I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So, if you want to hear what's going on, with HazAdapt with us, check us out on LinkedIn, but we're also on other social platforms.
If you want to learn more about HazAdapt, you can find the app on the App Store and Google Play. And as always, preparedness, right? It's not about fear. It's about reducing uncertainty before uncertainty reduces your options. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Disaster Class. Stay educated.
Stay prepared.
Stay equipped.
Class dismissed.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Disaster Class. Please remember to like, subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with someone else who should hear it. To learn more about emergency preparedness training, planning, and consulting services, visit InstinctReady.com. Disaster Class is brought to you by Instinct Ready Emergency Management and is directed, edited, and produced by Jason Perez. Copyright 2026, Instinct Ready Incorporated, all rights reserved.